So, what we're going to look at right now, I love this hand at so many different levels. This is going to be great to talk about many, many things. If you're skimming over this video, I've tagged this particular hand as like one of the most important hands for multiple different concepts in heads up pots. So we have this situation here where, again, I'm not going to do any blurring. 1-3, C Wong here out of seat number 4 is going to raise this up to 10, which is somewhat of a small sizing for this particular game, what we've seen. And Jake in the big blind is going to call the extra $7. Whether or not that's going to be a profitable call, heads up, in a vacuum, it's probably not, depending on the type of player Si Wong is, how tight he is. But if you are the type of player in Jake where you are willing to make moves post flop, it could be. I don't want to wash over pre flop, but we're going to get into a very, very interesting situation post flop because of what comes out. So, the board comes out King Deuce 4, as you can see. Now, it might be a little bit of a what you would think is a simple spot. Jake checks and Si Wong bets $10. Okay. So somewhat standard. Again, like in this game, I might bet a little bit more if I'm Si Wong in this particular situation. But I want you to pretend, for example, Si Wong opened this from late position or you were in a tournament. I can't stress enough how, unless they are extremely advanced players, how overrepresented king high boards are to continuation bet bluff. And what I mean by that is that if I was your regular player that opened with, say, a hand like ace queen from the cutoff or from the hijack and the big blind called, and I saw this board, the ace queen is going to basically like c-bet this type of board almost 100% of the time. And why is that? It's because people think that the king hits the preflop raiser's range a lot. When in fact, especially the later the person opens from, the later position the person opens from, the king doesn't actually hit his range all that much. If he's not opening king X, and the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of people open ace X. So on a board like ace deuce 4, that favors to hit the preflop raiser's range way more than king deuce 4. I'm talking about from late position. Because the guy from late position is opening ace X so much more often than he's opening king X. Now, obviously, Si Wong is from somewhat early position here. But if you're looking at this type of board and you call out of position with a hand like 5-4, especially if you had a backdoor flush draw, this is literally one of the absolute best types of hands to either check raise bluff or check call kind of as a reverse float. And the reason why, even though Jake doesn't have a backdoor flush draw here, is because you can call here and you can either check the turn, see what the guy does, or you could check raise flop, and you pick up a ton of equity, especially if you're suited here, in the form of a lot of straightening cards coming on the turn. With the 5-4, if a 3 comes, if a 6 comes, if a 4 comes, if a 5 comes, you improve a lot. And you're playing against a situation, this is specifically against a late position raiser, where there's a fairly good chance that your opponent doesn't have a king. Now, if you're playing it against an advanced opponent and you check raise 5-4 on a board like this, they're going to look at this and they're going to be like, what is this guy representing? He's only representing deuces or pocket fours as sets. He probably would have 3-bet pocket kings, so he's not representing all that much. But at this level, people just play their cards. You know what I mean? So this is a very, very good spot to continue on here, either with a call or continue on with a check raise if you think it's going to fold out all pairs above a 4. And even if you check raise and get called, and you think that the guy is always going to have a king, there are many, many opportunities for you to pick up equity on the turn. There's a fair amount of cards if we're counting, 4 3s, 4 6s, and then, the other 5 2 pairs and trip types of outs, 10 outs, something like that. And then there's the question of, well, how often is he going to, continue to call? But especially in a situation where a guy opens from late position and you defend with a hand like 4-5 and you see a board like this, it's just so ripe to either be reverse floated or taken away with a check raise. In a tournament, a lot of times I might just call and not risk the chips. The problem is that you give off some free equity with, 2 random overcards that might fold later on. But the point of this is that this particular flop spot is that people represent this board a lot more than they actually have it. Now you can see here that Jake basically just like snap check calls. Boom, turns a 5. By the way, too, in this particular scenario, if I had just check called with 4-5, this is going to be almost an auto check for me on the turn, whether it's a good or a bad player. Now, a lot of you guys know that are familiar with Crush Live Poker, I'm not a huge fan of slow playing, but I think this is the time to do it, because the guy either is going to have a king and he's going to bet again on the turn, or he's not going to have a king, and it doesn't matter. There's no real reason to just lead here, I think, on turn. And even probably more pronounced if there's a front door flush draw. When the backdoor flush draw comes in against an advanced player, they might think that you might be check raising on the come with some sort of pair plus straight draw. But I think, and if it's a bad player, they're going to bet, and you can size it small enough where they're going to call anyways. So I love the peel here with 4-5. I really do. Depending on this guy's frequency of betting pairs above 4s on this type of board, you could make the case that check raising could be good too. But at least calling. Like, I'm never folding here. This is the best candidate. Like, I like calling here. Probably, it's more valuable to call here with a deep stack than like a hand like probably like pocket 7s, pocket 8s. I'm more comfortable continuing on here with 5-4 than pocket 7s, pocket 8s. Even sometimes pocket 10s, pocket jacks, depending on the types of hands. So Jake's going to check here again. He insta-called. He checked here again. We're going to look at this from both perspectives here because this is a low-stakes video. If I'm Si Wong, I bet the flop. Like I said, I might have bet a little bit larger. I'm certainly going to bet the turn. I am planning on taking this for 3 straights. That turn card actually increases the probability that my opponent is going to call. He's always probably going to call at 1-3 with any king. Remember, he closed the action. We raised pretty small pre-flop. But if he peeled off with a single pair that was less than a king, like in the form of ace-deuce, ace-4, 5, whatever it is, 4-3, he's going to continue to call. That's actually a really good card for us to continue to get value from a super wide range with ace-king. Because if he called with 5-4 and the turn was like a queen and we bet again, he might just fold. Or the turn was any overcard to second pair, he might just fold. But this fits into the second and bottom pair cards that now pick up straight draws. Types of scenarios, plus 2x, 4x of spades, gut shot spades, whatever it is. That's a really good card for us. If we're Si Wong, again, pay attention to the fact that we have the ace of spades, so he can never have the nut flush draw. So I'm continuing to bet for value. Pot's 41. I'm probably going to bet 30. We'll see here in a second. He did bet 30. Okay, fine. Jake just calls. Now, this is obviously a problem. Now, if I'm going to just peel with 5-4 with the intention of seeing what this guy does on turn, and part of the reason why this might be a better spot to check raise flop against an early position raiser pre-flop, is because of the fact that an early position raiser pre-flop might have a lot of second pair to the board types of hands as opposed to a late position guy that might have just missed. Even though we're giving up free equity against the late position guy, it's not that big of a deal in a cash game. But against an early position guy, if we call out of the blind against UTG2, and we check raise flop, he's probably only continuing on with a king at this level. Higher level guys might peel more lightly because they think that you're repping a pretty thin range if you're never just check raising with a single paired king out of the blind. But at this level, um, you know what I'm saying. But once this guy bets again on the turn, so if I'm Jake and I decided to just peel, like I said, the frequency might be a little bit higher against early position that I might check raise. But if I just peel with a call, and now the turn brings a 5, specifically now that it brings backdoor spades, and he bets again, at this level, I'm certainly check raising here with these stacks. He bets 30. I'm going to make it like 85. I don't want to blow out aces. I don't want to blow out ace king. I don't want to blow out king queen. But I think that it's a very reasonable assumption that when he bets again, 80, 90% of the time he has king x, at least. Are we going to run into like pocket kings or ace 3 some of the time? Sure. Very, very rarely. We're not playing that deep. That's going to be a cooler type of hand. But I've watched a lot of low stakes live no limit. And, years ago, you'd be surprised when you check raise here with 4-5, like back in 2007, 2008, the guy might just ship back with a short stack with aces or ace king or any king. It doesn't matter. Even less than that. You know what I mean? That dynamic doesn't exist as much now in the games these days. He might just call as opposed to ship back. But I would certainly build now when I hit a 5 or a 4, especially when I check and he bets again. There's just no reason to not check raise here and go for stacks. Now he just calls. Again, I would pretty much never play the turn this way. And as played on the river, if I was for some reason just check calling, the only reason why I would check call flop and check call turn would be if I thought that the guy was taking me to value town. Like I was going to take a value own line. Like I was up against a good player where if I check raised the turn, I was scared that he would fold one pair. So if I check called the turn, it would be because I thought the guy might actually bet fold a king. So I check call turn, and if that was the case, then I would check the river. I wouldn't recommend that at 1-3 because I think at 1-3 a guy, I've seen it before, a guy might check back like ace king here, king queen, whatever it is. But again, specifically if I check call turn, it would be for the intention of having the guy value own himself and me making a small check raise on the river. Other than that, you could just lead river, but probably not in this scenario. I wouldn't be check calling and then necessarily leading river, because if I was going to check call and be concerned about him not value betting river, I would just make a small check raise on the turn. Now flipping to Si Wong's hand, Si Wong has done absolutely nothing wrong, with the exception of maybe making a little bit of a too small of a sizing on the flop. Once this guy calls the flop, our flop bet, and he calls our turn bet, well, now the draws have bricked out in the form of the pairs plus straight draws, another overcard to what was second pair on the board in the form of a 10. So I'm going to be going for pure value against a king. Like I'm not going to expect to get called by like ace 4 here, even 5-3, something like that. I'm probably going to bet the river at least $75 at a minimum and try to value target a weaker king. And that's exactly what Si Wong did. He bet 75. Jake just basically snap called. Now, again, if I were to take a line of just check calling turn because I wanted this guy to value own himself on the river and he were to bet 75, 100% I'm going to put in a raise. I'm going to put it into like 175, 150, 150 to 200, even though my bluffing frequency is almost nil. It's a 1-3 game. People aren't coming off of aces. They're not coming off of ace king. Jake lost a lot of value in this hand because I would say 30 to 50% of players here might even check back ace king on the river. Jake got one of the best bricks that he could get where there's going to be a fair amount of people that are going to continue to value bet ace king or aces. But what if the river was, I don't know, like a 10 of spades? Even with Si Wong having ace king with the ace of spades, you would just see people check it back. If the river was any card above a 10, a jack, a queen, they would just check it back. You're losing a ton of value by just check calling flop and check calling turn, with the intention of going for a check raise on the river. And again, if you just check call turn, you have to check raise river. Because if you check raise river, even if Si Wong had ace 3 here, he can't even come back over the top. Or he probably wouldn't at this level. If I was in Si Wong's spot and I had ace 3, and I see bet flop, I raise pre, see bet flop, got a call, bet turn, got a call, river came a 10, and then the guy check raised, I would probably play for stacks here because I would think that it's very easy that he could have been slow playing pocket fours, pocket deuces, kings up, something like that. But let's say, for example, I see bet the flop with pocket fives, got called, bet turn, and then got check raised on river, where I don't beat ace 3, I don't beat 6-3. I very well might just call. I think a better example might be if I flopped, let's say I opened with deuces in Si Wong's spot, bet flop, bet turn, and got check raised on river. It's a clear cut just call. So you can see that from Jake's spot, your range is pretty protected. You're never really going to get re-raised at the end here. Now, occasionally you're going to check raise and get called, and you're going to lose to like pocket kings or king 10. But if you're worried about like getting to showdown, you're almost never going to get raised back unless your opponent has the nuts. A great hand though, by the way. And this is just 1-3 no limit.